Freestyle was better.
Not such a thing. Сказали, что система.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayana Namaskritya
Nayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Sarasatim Vyasam
Tato Chayam Mudiraye
Toshayam Mudiraye
Nasta Preshu Abhadreshu
Astapareshu Abhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhaktir Bhavati Bhaktir Bhavati Uttama Shlokte Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki.
Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki.
Hare Krishna. Dear devotees, we'd like to welcome everybody for today's Scientific Saturdays. We're going to read from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, text number 5. Munaya, sadhu, prishto, aham, bhavatbhir, loka, mangalam, jat, kritta, krishna, samprashno, yenatma, suprasidati. Munaya sadhu prishtoham, bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati. Munaya sadhu prishtoham, bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati. Munaya sadhu prishtoham, bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham,
Bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham, Bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham,
Bhavadbhir lokamangalam,
Yatkrita Krishna samprashno,
Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya sadhu prishtoham, Bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati. Munaya sadhu prishtoham, Bhavadbhir lokamangalam, Yatkrita Krishna samprashno, Yenatma suprasidati.
Munaya, O sages, sadhu. This is relevant. Prishta, question. Aham, myself. Bhavatbhi, by all of you. Loka, the world. Mangalam, welfare. Jat, because. Krittaha, made. Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Samprashnaha, relevant question. Jina, by which Atma, self, suprasidati, completely pleased. Translation: O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. Please repeat after me. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. Purport. Since it has been stated herein before that in the Bhagavatam the absolute truth is to be known, the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya are proper and just, because they pertain to Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. In Bhagavad Gita 15:15, the Personality of Godhead says that in all the Vedas there is nothing but the urge for searching after Him, Lord Krishna. Thus the questions that pertain to Krishna are the sum and substance of all the Vedic inquiries. The whole world is full of questions and answers. The birds, beasts, and men are all busy in the matter of perpetual questions and answers. In the morning, the birds in the nest become busy with questions and answers. And in the evening also, the same birds come back and again become busy with questions and answers. The human being, unless he is fast asleep at night, is busy with questions and answers. The businessmen in the market are busy with questions and answers. And so also the lawyers in the court and the students in the schools and colleges. The legislators in the parliament are also busy with questions and answers, and the politicians and the press representatives are all busy with questions and answers. Although they go on making such questions and answers for their whole life, they are not at all satisfied. Satisfaction of the soul can only be obtained by questions and answers on the subject of Krishna. Krishna is our most intimate master, friend, father or son, and object of conjugal love. Forgetting Krishna, we have created so many objects of questions and answers, but none of them are able to give us complete satisfaction. All things but Krishna give temporary satisfaction only. So if we are to have complete satisfaction, we must take to the questions and answers about Krishna. We cannot live for a moment without being questioned or without giving answers. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam deals with questions and answers that are related to Krishna, we can drive the highest satisfaction only by reading and hearing this transcendental literature. One should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam and make an all-around solution to all problems pertaining to social, political, or religious matters. Srimad Bhagavatam and Krishna are the sum and total of all these things. Munaya sadhu pristaham bhavatbhir loka mangalam yat krita Krishna samprashno yenatma suprasidati. O sages, I have been just questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदामयं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकम्। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So today, as already announced, we have another session of Scientific Saturdays where we discuss different topics of Srimad Bhagavatam in relation to modern science or science as such. Today's title actually is the quest for knowledge. As Prabhupada points out, the whole life actually can be viewed as being filled with questions and answers. There is also one Upanishad who is called Kena Upanishad. Kena is the question, why? And it is listed as the second of the important Upanishads. There are generally 10 Upanishads who are described as being the most important out of the 108. And first is listed Ishopanishad, and the second one is Kena Upanishad. So already from there we can see it is a very relevant process or approach to the absolute truth. So we also can see that in our daily life, as Prabhupada pointed out in the purport, actually in all spheres of life, this question and answer is being orchestrated or being put in place. This is due to that whoever comes to this material world actually is born in ignorance. Om Jnanatimirandasya. When we come to this world, we're in complete ignorance. So we have to acquire. But it's natural for a living entity to want knowledge, to want to know things. This is due to our constitutional position. Our real identity is Satchit Ananda Vigraha, means Sat, eternal, Chit, full of knowledge, and Ananda, always happy. So naturally, this material condition is completely opposed to this, meaning that we don't have any knowledge, we're not eternal, and we're not happy. So the Vedic knowledge describes two processes of acquiring knowledge. One is Aroha Panta and the other one is Avaroha Panta, meaning the deductive way of acquiring knowledge and the inductive way of acquiring knowledge. So when Vedic understanding says that Avaroha Panta, the deductive way of knowledge is the proper way. Meaning that to receive knowledge from higher authorities. That's what it means, avrodapanta, deductive. Because the other approach, the inductive process, meaning the process by acquiring knowledge through experiment, is imperfect. Because the living entity in his conditional state is imperfect. He has 4 defects, which are: he has limited senses, he is illusioned, he tends to cheat, and what's the 4th one? He makes mistakes. Yes. So with these characteristics, it won't be possible to attain perfect knowledge, because whatever endeavor we start is afflicted with these inebrities. So therefore it is said that it's not possible by simply experimental knowledge to gain the absolute truth, to become the perfect understanding of what is what. So here we already can see that nowadays approach in order to acquire knowledge is actually based on the acquiring experimental way. That's why no matter how hard we endeavor, it won't really lead to success, meaning lead to knowledge which will be satisfying to the self. And that's what we actually experience. So many different fields of knowledge are explored by modern science, but still people are not really happy and satisfied. On the contrary, sometimes we'll get the impression that the more humankind delves into different subject matters, the outcome is actually more and more chaotic. That is because the understanding is faulty, is imperfect. Whereas the Vedic process is diametrically opposed. When the material approach, the deductive way, is actually based on the personal ability and the aperture, the experimental aperture. In contrary, the deductive way is by receiving the knowledge through parampara. Prabhupada actually makes the point that this is not based on an intellectual process. Rather, it is the process of surrendering. The student is actually taking instructions from the teacher, from the spiritual master, and by executing these instructions, he is actually satisfying the spiritual master And when the spiritual master is satisfied, he will shower his mercy on the student. And in that way, the knowledge is revealed. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada. Because the spiritual master is a personality which is not afflicted by the four shortcomings of the conditioned life. He's free, he is beyond, and he is well aware of the absolute truth, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, being in contact, he has actually the propensities to convey that knowledge to the inquisitive and serious student. This is the secret of success, or the confidential part of how to receive knowledge. Is a very important point for us devotees to understand. Actually, to receive knowledge, to acquire proper knowledge, the process is not through intellectual ability, but the process is actually to humble surrender to the spiritual master, to the teacher. And when the teacher is satisfied, he actually will convey the knowledge. And that knowledge is revealed in the heart. That knowledge is not on the intellectual plane, but that knowledge is coming from the heart. Kene Brahma Hrida Adipavaye. As Lord Brahma has been endowed with that knowledge, through meditation he satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead revealed that knowledge in the heart of Lord Brahma. And by acquiring that knowledge, Lord Brahma actually could perform his duty, which is the creation of this material world and the creation of the different forms of the living entities and the relevant activities pertaining to each of the different living forms. So this is described as confidential, because it is not related to some personal endeavor, but it is the mercy of the superior authorities. Finally, the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is actually a very important point for us devotees to understand, meaning that it is not knowledge, true knowledge, knowledge which finally will satisfy the self, is not dependent on any external endeavor. It is not dependent on studying Vedic literatures. It is not depending on any extraneous activities. It's not depending on any austerity. It's solely depending on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how to attain that mercy is by following the servants, the pure servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and trying to satisfy these highly elevated personalities. Mahajana yena gata sapanta. When Yudhishthira Maharaj made that statement, how to acquire proper knowledge, and he made the statement that it is not to be found, or not to be attained by philosophical discourse, even by very austere practices. No, actually, that knowledge is hidden in the heart of the confidential servants. So by following the path of these elevated personalities, we will actually be able to, or we qualify ourselves to receive this knowledge. So that knowledge is Paravidya. Para, Apara. There are two divisions of knowledge. One is Aparavidya and one is Paravidya. Aparavidya means material knowledge, and Paravidya means transcendental knowledge. Jai Shri Shri Govinda Dasa. Para and Apara. Prabhupada describes it. Para means superior and Apara means inferior. So superior energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is spiritual energy. And the inferior energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is material energy. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually states that the Vedic scriptures, the 4 Vedas and the supplementary text to it, being Jyotishur or other, these kind of scriptures, they actually deal with Apara Vidya. And the Vedanta Sutra deals with the Paravidya. Meaning that the living entity has to come to the point where it is completely frustrated with material life and understands that there is nothing to be gained in this material realm. When he comes to the state of asking about his identity, Atata Brahma Jingyasa, asking for the absolute Brahma. Vedic literature mainly deals with this Chatur Varga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These are in the realm of Apara Vidya. Why? Because it's pertaining to the external energy, to this material world. And Dharma means activities, proper activities. If the living entities follows the proper activities, Artha comes, means material wealth. prosperity. Through prosperity, karma. Through prosperity, living entity gets the ability or the chance to enjoy the material nature. But at a certain time, after enjoying or trying to enjoy, the living entity comes to the conclusion, even after having tried so many ways to enjoy, still I'm not satisfied. So that is the stage where a living entity understands that this is not the proper place to be. So then comes the desire for liberation, moksha. But moksha is actually just the backside of the coin. Attachment and detachment. It's still material. So we have to go beyond that. And that is the spiritual nature. So there are different processes described in the Vedic scriptures, starting with karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and finally bhakti yoga. So karma yoga means engaging in different activities according to Vedic scriptures in order to achieve different benefits, karma activities, practically to enjoy, sense enjoyment. Jnana yoga is the state where the living entity starts to analyze what is what and tries to find out what is his real identity. That finally will lead him to dhyana yoga. Dhyana yoga is, in simple words, the process that Vedic scriptures tells that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is situated in each one's heart. And dhyana yoga, Ashtanga yoga process, is the process how to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead in our own heart. And when one perfects this process, one actually realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his heart, and at the same time also realizes his own minuteness. And as it's the natural conclusion that if the infinitesimal small comes to the darshan of the unlimited big, naturally we bow down in awe and reverence, and that is actually the starting point of devotional service. So it further has been described that all these processes, karma, jnana and dhyana, are actually not really satisfying the living entity. Meaning, Prabhupada points it out, they're actually imperfect processes, because they won't lead to the perfectional stage of realizing the Absolute Truth in its complete feature, meaning as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The only way to realize, to attain the Absolute Truth is through devotional service, through bhakti. Only bhakti will enable the living entity to fully realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And only then the living entity will be completely satisfied and completely happy. That's why all the Vedic literatures point to that conclusion, as Prabhupada points out in the purport, Vedaischa sarvam aham eva vedya. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I'm to be known by the Vedas. Vedanta Krit Veda Vichaham. And actually I'm the knower and I'm the compiler of the Vedas. So this is very important for us to understand, especially when dealing with the academic world, so-called scientific world. It's not that we want to minimize the achievements of the academic world of today, not at all. To try to cultivate knowledge and acquire knowledge is always laudable and good. But at the same time, we also have to consider what is the proper process, what is the right process in order to achieve that goal. And in that way, the Vedic knowledge is quite clear, the Vedic version, what actually will lead finally to the proper knowledge, and that is by taking the knowledge from authority. It's quite interesting. Nowadays, this is the main credo of science, that nothing is accepted unless it's proven by experiment. So, but as we made the point before, it won't be possible, because if we are limited, if our senses are imperfect, then how you want to achieve the perfect knowledge? Prabhupada once made a point that the Vedic knowledge says there are 900,000 living forms living in the water. So how you want to experimentally verify that? You won't be able to, because everybody understands that, and even modern science acknowledges that it's very difficult to find out what is below 300 meters even. And we know that the depth of the sea is at its deepest place 11,000 kilometers. And even modern science acknowledges that actually they don't know practically nothing what is going on there. And it's not only that it's 11,000 meters or 11 kilometers deep, it's also pitch dark there, so how you want to see anything? Prabhupada also says that the Vedic scripture says that there is one fish called Tingala, and he eats whales just like that. But we only know of whales, and we already think like, what a gigantic fish that is. But the Veda says that there is a fish called Tingala who eats them just like that. At the same time, he also makes the statement that that fish won't make himself visible to us. And then Prabhupada points out, so what will be their answer? You know, like if we say there are 900,000 living forms in water, they will say, oh, why you say 900,000? How you can prove it? And Prabhupada says, so, no, you can't prove it. Because due to our imperfect senses and inability, you know, to really research all the different spheres underwater, we never be able to completely come to the conclusion of what is what. So that's why it's necessary to accept authority. Because the Vedic scriptures are not written by human beings, meaning by living entities who are afflicted with these four discrepancies. They are perfect, coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedanta Krit Vedachi. Krishna says. So, an intelligent person will accept the Supreme Authority. Who can know better than the Supreme Personality of God? And who is the origin of everything? The origin of the spiritual worlds and the material worlds. Prabhupada also used many times the other example about mortality of the human being. So, if you want to find out, you know, whether there is immortal life, you have to check each and every individual, whether he's going to die or not. So we all can understand that won't be possible. So in that way, that approach, so-called scientific approach, is not perfect, because it never will be, following its own standard. And on top of that, as we made the point in the beginning, that even after trying so many different ways, we actually can see, meaning exploring different fields of knowledge, mainly to different technologies and other processes, humankind actually didn't got happy and also satisfied, whereas rather is drifting in the other direction. Is getting sidetracked, is getting nervous, unrestful. It's quite interesting. Human beings consider that technology to be the desirable process, meaning by inventing different means for sense enjoyment and making life easier, different technologies, they will become happy. But the opposite is actually happening. Instead of becoming peaceful, which is the basis of becoming happy, First we have to become peaceful. If you're not peaceful, we can't become happy. Instead of becoming peaceful, we actually drift in the complete different directions. All these modern gadgets, computers, they actually make the people mad. That ADSL, how you call it in English? This, before 50 years ago, there was not such kind like a disease. But nowadays it's quite common. So the question is why? I mean, what's the characteristics of these kind of people who have that so-called disease? They can't sit quietly, eh? They can't concentrate on one thing for too long. They're hyperactive. So, and even nowadays, I find it quite funny. These social medias, which we all have, even we make ourselves fun out of it, you know, showing that everybody is glued to the hand, you know. It's commonly known that there is too much attention given to that small toy. And the parents are warned that they should check their kids not to become too much addicted to that. But still, they're keeping on developing, you know, in that way, even after knowing it. So then one may question, where is the progress of human